Ratzo's fit sizes. But that wasn't what he was after. He wanted something that would clarify a feeling he had in himself about all of these purchases, not just the socks, but whatever it was. It wouldn't stand still for it. He gathered up the packages and climbed the stairs to the flat. Ratzo had a number of blankets wrapped around him, and his teeth were clamped together. To keep them from chattering, he swallowed 2 aspirins with a little water, but he couldn't get any of the soup down until the chills subsided. By then Joe had to warm it again in a little pan over the canned heat, and now Ratzo was sweating so that he wanted to remove all of his blankets entirely. They quarreled over the wisdom of this, and also over the question of a name for Ratzo's complaint. Joe wanted to call it cat fever, a name Sally had liked to apply to a number of disorders he'd suffered in childhood, on the theory that all sicknesses came from cats, but Ratzo said he hadn't been near a cat, and besides, what he had was the flu. While he drank the soup, Joe showed him the socks and long underwear. Ratzo looked at them and shook his head. "Are they wrong?" Joe asked. "No, but while you was buying the underwear, I could have hooked the socks. That's okay, though." As an afterthought, he added, "Thanks." And then he said, "Hey, Joe, don't get sore about this or anything, you promise?" "Yeah." "Promise?" "Yeah." "Well, I don't think I can walk." Ratzo looked at the wall. He was obviously embarrassed. "I mean, I've been falling down a lot and what? I'm scared." He put the soup on the floor next to the pile of blankets and began to shiver again. He clamped his jaws together and held his arms tight against his body. "What of?" Joe said. "I told you already." "I know, but what'll happen?" Ratzo said. "I mean, what do they, do with you? If you can't, shit. Who? What does who do with you?" "I don't know. The cops. Or how should I know?" "You mean," Joe said, "like if you can't walk?" Ratzo nodded. "Then what do they do with you?" Ratzo nodded some more. Then Joe got to his feet and began to shout. "Well, what's the cops got to do with that? That's none of their fucking business, who walks and who don't. Man, I swear, you talk like a person with a paper asshole. Don't you know what you and me's going to do? You and me's going to Florida." "Florida? What the?" "Just a matter of bus fare is all." "Come on with Florida already. Cut the crap." Ratzo frowned and searched Joe's face for some sign of sense. Joe said, "I've been figuring main thing we break our ass for here is keep warm. Right? What you're doing now, you're shivering, see? Second main thing is food. Right again, right?" "Well, in Florida, it's a matter of coconuts and sunshine and all that. And you don't break your ass at all. Use your head, Ratzo. You know them things were talked about all these shit plenty of times. Did you forget?" He took out his money and displayed it, spreading the bills out like poker hand. "Here's the start. What I made last night, tonight, I'm making the rest. It's all set. I was just waiting to let you know is all. Now, tell me this. We figure the bus to take 38 apiece, okay? So, times 2 is how much? What you gonna take me?" Ratzo said. Joe nodded. "So times 2 is how much?" 76. Listen, Joe. I got 19. It's in that shoe. Where'd you get 19? Joe went after the shoe. ass in a sling. Joe said, "Can't you shut up? Can't you just once shut up and let me do something? I mean, is there a law, says Joe Buck, can't have a one lousy idea? Thought getting his ass in a sling, just one puny little goddamn fucking idea." He came back into the room and flopped into a chair, making his feet land heavy on the floor. "Now you gone and shot him whole mood right in the ass." But he rose again at once and returned to the door. "No, you didn't either," he said. "I'm damned if you did. You and me's leaving town tonight." He slammed the door and went down the stairs, 2 at a time. Joe scanned the doorways and theater lobbies and penny arcades of Times Square in search of a money-making opportunity. And for the first 2 hours, nothing much happened. It was too cold to stand still for long periods. He waited. He wasted some 15 minutes in Duffy Square on a prospect, too frightened to speak up, and another even larger piece of an hour was squandered in following a pretty woman all the way over to Grand Central Station, only to watch her board the train for New Haven. He walked back to Times Square and all the way up Broadway to 50th Street, over to and down 8th Avenue, and across 42nd again, and then covered the same ground a second and third time, warming up between trips in a dirty bookshop and at a game room called Fascination, where he lost $1.20. And then, along about 8 o'clock, having forgotten for the moment the object of his hunt, he was looking idly in the window of a 7th Avenue magic shop when he realized that the liveliest possibility of the evening had shown itself less than 3 feet from him and was looking in the same store window. This was a red, white, and blue person of about 50. He was stocky, almost fat, with very black eyebrows, face that seemed always to be smiling. Even in repose, his eyes were anxious and uncertain of every single thing in the world. But the most vivid aspect of the man were those colors of a musical comedy, American, the red of his complexion, the pure white of his hair, and his silk muffler, and the lively blue of his eyes and his overcoat. Joe had been taught that you weren't supposed to be the first to speak. You had to let them do that. There were a number of theories in support of this policy. For one thing, speaking first showed a certain eagerness that was apt to lower your price. And for another, if your prospect turned out to be a policeman in disguise, he would arrest you for soliciting. But Joe felt the necessity of making a strike before the cold really got through to him. At a certain point, on these winter nights in the doorways of Times Square, his face became numb and pale, and he was unable to think clearly or behave with any ease at all. From then on, he would begin to look and act like a loser, and no one would want anything to do with him at all. And so, he threw caution to the winds, and screwed up a good big smile, and swung his eyes onto that red, white, and blue face, and was about to speak when the man himself spoke up. "How are you?" The big face broke open in the middle, showing still more red and white in the gums, and perfect teeth, and he clasped Joe's hand in both of his own. From his first words, the man succeeded in establishing an atmosphere of extraordinary intimacy. A stranger observing the scene might have said that two friends of long standing had come together in a surprise reunion after years of agonizing separation. His voice, he started, talking at once in a way that suggested he might never stop, was deep and rich, and vigorous, and at the same time oddly prissy, giving him the aspect of a hysterical, somewhat sissified bull, introducing himself as Townsend P. for Pedersen, Locke of Chicago. "Call me Towny," he said he was in paper, and had come to New York to attend a manufacturers' convention, and frankly to have a little fun, damn it, he added, like a person who has decided to put his foot down. "This is my first night, and I'll consider it a ghastly omen, clouding my entire 10 days if you don't consent to have dinner with me. Please, it's awfully important to me. You will? You'll say yes?" Joe found that his assent wasn't really needed. For he had hardly begun to nod when he found himself being almost forcibly conducted up 42nd Street. Towny did not once stop talking. What's more, he wasn't the kind of talker who required any sign of listening. He flitted from topic to topic in butterfly fashion. Chicago, food, his mother, the convention, New York, people in general, cowboys, the need for fun, his mother again, the Midwest restaurants, religion, Michigan Avenue, the art of conversation. "That's what I like about you. You're such a wonderful conversationalist," he said at one point, causing Joe to open his his eyes wide and nod in amazement. Now, where would you like to eat? I give you your choice of all the restaurants on the island of Manhattan. No, on the entire East Coast. If there's some place in New Jersey or Long Island or even Philadelphia that you absolutely hanker for, we'll hire a car. Now you say, Gemboard 21, the low. Never mind how you're dressed. They know me. I'll tell them you're with the rodeo. There's always a rodeo in New York. Besides, you look very elegant, and these places, the really good ones, never fret over neckties or any of the nouveau cheeky crap. Oh, a snap of the fingers. But damn it all, I'll tell you what we'll have to do. We'll have to eat in my room because I have this phone call coming at 9:30. My mother always calls me at her bedtime, and I've got to be there. She's 94, and at that age it seems to me you can just damn well be there when they call up to say goodnight. Don't you agree with that? So won't that be nice, to have dinner sent up? I've got a very modest, perfectly pleasant suite at the Europa near 9th Avenue. All my fancy friends stay at the Pierre or the Plaza, and they can have it. Why do you stay down there, Townsend, please? Well, of course, I know, and you know that 50 years ago the Europa was the only hotel in Manhattan. Those high ceilings, all that marble in the bathrooms. We have an eye for real quality. He squeezed Joe's arm, as opposed to mere fashion. Here, look. As they turned into the lobby, a young man with a thin, cold, dedicated face pressed a piece of paper into Joe's hand. It said, "You are in a burning building, and Jesus is the only possible fireman." He crumpled it and put it in his pocket. "Look at this magnificent lobby," said Townsend. "P-lock." The lobby of the Europa had become a kind of arcade for small enterprises. One quarter had been partitioned off for a passport photographer. Another piece had been given over to a health club, and so on. And there were a number of vending machines for candy bars, soft drinks, and cigarettes. The floor was of a cracked tile, and had been recently scrubbed in a slapdash way, leaving streaks of dried dirt and a faint smell of ammonia in the air. The room clerk, a gray, small, not really there at all person, seemed to have been selected for his ability to project to the guest a profound lack of interest in their comings and goings. They stepped onto a creaking, slow, self-operated elevator, and Townsend P-lock talked all the way up to the 5th floor and kept on talking all the way down the hall. Macy's, the park, the village, the lights, the millions of strangers from every possible part of the world. He was listing the aspects of New York that delighted him most. The utter and total privacy, the sort of, I don't know, madly forward thrust of everything. Do you understand that? I mean, how shall I put it? My sense of time here is completely altered, and Chicago, mind you, is no mere cow town. But here you see, there's this grinding forward of and spoke with one voice, and could be felt and heard as a single being of tremendous force. You and I, Locke said, contribute to it, yes. Isn't that exciting? Think of it. Your heart goes dum-de-dum-de-dum, and the projector in the theater goes clickety-clickety-click, and each one of those cars goes groom. And oh, just thinking about it is more than I can stand. Would you like a drink? I've got some nice gin, but if you prefer something else, they'll send it up. Maybe you drink only Eneo, or Irish, or Sake. Do speak up. Gin's fine. And I really do find it unbearably exciting, Locke continued, this time thing in New York. But on the other hand, the identical awareness can hurl me straight into the abyss. I'm manic, you see, and I have these hairy depressions, and they all have to do with time. For instance, in Chicago, I often have this feeling that time really stopped about 20 years ago, and that everything that happened since is some hideous mistake. Isn't that morbid? Par exemple. In that mood, it seems to me absolutely grotesque that there should be in the world, anywhere, this white-haired gentleman you see before you. He doesn't exist. There was a war. There was a young man in uniform, handsome as handsome can be, with quite black hair, and he was supposed to die in the war, but he didn't. There was some idiot mistake in heaven, and he's still here. Isn't that amusing? All right, that's enough about me. I am through talking for the evening. Here's your drink. Now I want to hear all about you and conditions out west. I mean, what's happening in cattle, for heaven's sake. But first, let me confess something to you. The West holds a tremendous power over me. The vastness there and the romance, that whole society of tumbleweed and leather. Do you see, even if you weren't an exceptionally fine person, which I know you are, I knew that at once. Gifted and sensitive and unusual in many ways, but even if you weren't all that, I would still undoubtedly have felt this. He waved the palm of his hand back and forth over his heart, as if it were a magnet that would draw out the word he wanted. Rapport. He thrust the hand forward now, as if rapport were displayed upon it. Simply because you come from the Great West. My mother shares this with me. Indeed she does. She would absolutely adore you. And when she telephones, he looked at his watch. At about 9:30, I want you to get on the wire and say, "Hello, Estelle. What is your name?" "Joe." "Hello, Estelle. I'm Joe. And Townsend's being a very good boy, or something, anything. I'll introduce you. I'll say you're a cowboy, and she'll be so This was spoken with a kind of savage force. Proceeding more quietly, he leaned forward and said, "Let me explain. My mother happens to be an exceedingly rare human being of the most extraordinary sensibilities. The privilege of enjoying her company is worth any sacrifice. I don't wish to overstate the case, but if I were to describe my mother in such a way as to do her the most meager justice, I would seem to be guilty of the grossest excesses. Therefore I am usually silent on the subject, silent as a stone, for the simple reason that the average person, having a very limited concept of the real possibilities of the human spirit, is unable to grasp. For instance, let me interrupt myself. I am often told, and even by the very close friends, 'Oh, this is so sad,' and such a comment on the poverty of, you won't believe it, but this relationship that I describe, these persons call it sick. And do you know why? Because I haven't married. Well, I haven't chosen to, and why in heaven's name should I?" This thought silenced the man. He seemed to have forgotten Joe's presence, and he sat staring at an arm of the couch, frowning, teeth clenched, and then suddenly, aware of the drink in his hand, he raised it, so suddenly that he spilled part of it on his trousers, smiled, wiped it off, proposed a toast to the Wild West, and began to speak again. "You see, I happen to be passionate on the subject, and of course we live in an age in which all passion is suspect. All the old values have these ugly little clinical names now. Loyalty is fixation, duty is guilt, and all love is some sort of complex. You should hear Estelle. She's so amusing on the subject, and you see it's rarely the psychiatrist himself who talks such nonsense. It's your best friends. But don't you think it takes a tiny mind to hand down such judgments on the secret heart of another? Would you be so impertinent? Of course not. Let me tell you what a real analyst says. May I? And this man is $50 per hour. Need I say more about his qualifications? Well, he says it's an extremely successful relationship. And why? Because it works. It's all very simple. The ideal of the infant is to maintain its mother's love forever. I have done this. I have lived this ideal existence. The problems are relatively minor. First of all, she will predecease me, perhaps. Oh, you see, that's one of the marvels of my mother's character. She won't die. He pounded the chair arm with his fist. It's true, these women of my mother's breed, they refuse to die. They are on the side of life. They will not say yes to death. They have far too much love of life in them simply to let go of it all. That's courage. That's how this country was traversed in the covered wagon days. The men were supported, cajoled, driven on by these women, and that's how the primitive was conquered, annihilated. Do you realize? And this is not at all off the track. This is the very heart of the matter. My mother went to Minnesota in a wagon. In other words, let me interrupt. Let me tell you what this means in her lifetime. This country has gone from the pioneer stage to the complete flowering that all of us enjoy today. You and I, Joe, every day we reap the harvest in this garden spot of the word. You and I, Joe, every day we reap the harvest There's no country in the entire history of the world that has progressed from the brute to the utterly civilized with such dispatch, such efficiency. And there's your reason. He pointed rather coyly to Estelle's picture and winked at it. The old lady in the photograph appeared to be modestly accepting the compliment. Isn't she cute? The dead image of Queen Victoria. Our entire home is done in Victorian, pierced rosewood and red velvet, and we live in a glorious tower overlooking the lake. And with such grace and style, I take her to the theater and all the concerts in her wheelchair when she's up to it, don't I? He said to the picture, and then blew it a kiss and declared it was time to eat. There followed a long telephone conversation in which the room clerk told Locke there was no restaurant in the hotel, and Locke tried assiduously to convince the room clerk that he was mistaken in this peculiar notion. There had to be a restaurant because he was hungry. At one point, he cupped his hand over the mouthpiece and described the impasse to his guest. Joe, can you believe it? This poor man's got it into his head that there's no restaurant in the entire hotel. And of course, there's no reasoning with these people anymore. The railroads are the same way. You see why I'm forced to fly. At length, the recalcitrant clerk admitted that there was a Chinese restaurant in the next block, and promised to send someone for chop suey and egg rolls. Before, during, and after this meal, and even while his large white teeth were being picked and sucked, Locke continued to spew out words. He seemed to be building something with them. One of those nightmare constructions that is constantly being undermined at a slightly greater rate of speed than one is able to achieve in the building. This one seemed to have to do with the identity of Chopin, for even though the conversation had little to do with him, it proceeded on the assumption that Locke's guest was a kind of ideal and perfect being, composed of all the manliness and heroism of an early Gary Cooper, with the culture and sensibility and compassion of a Ronald Coleman. Locke seemed to be afraid that if his visitor were allowed to speak so much as one full sentence, the construction would topple. Meanwhile, Joe Buck found it unnecessary to listen to what was said. He merely cocked an eyebrow, set his face at a certain tilt, and whenever the speaker smiled, he followed suit and nodded agreeably. Occasionally, he would tune in on a phrase or two. My mother can't bear anything depressing. Of course, you cattle people understand these matters far better than I, a mere paper merchant. Back to my thesis, then. The brutes tame the country, and the women tame the brutes, the latter, of course, having by far the more difficult job, and succeeding, I'd say almost entirely. Wouldn't you agree? And Joe's thoughts would return to the problem of getting the evening onto a paying basis, but he made little progress. The words of his host acted upon him with a soporific, almost paralyzing effect. He had constantly to fight against falling into an actual trance of boredom by shifting his position, rubbing his neck, cracking his knuckles, squinting. It was after 11 when the telephone rang. Joe seized this opportunity to go into the bathroom, where he could consult himself in the mirror. As he left the room, Locke was speaking loudly and distinctly into the mouthpiece. "Do you want to hear about a coincidence, Mama? A coincidence? Guess who we were talking about at this very moment?" I said, when the phone rang. "Guess who was being discussed?" "Discussed?" "No, not disgusted. Discussed. Talked about. Oh, Mama, haven't you got it turned up? Which one are you wearing?" "That one's no good. Why aren't you wearing the acosticon?" Acosticon. Mama, damn it. This is impossible. In the bathroom, Joe splashed his face and neck with cold water until he felt that some blood had returned to his head. Then he leaned in very close to his own image and whispered, "Minute that some bitch gets off the telly goddamn phone, you move into action. That's an order." Six. Joe looked around for something to steal. There was an electric razor on the top of the toilet, but it was too bulky for his pocket. Besides, under a palm tree, where would you plug the thing in? There was nothing worth bothering about in the medicine chest either. But he did help himself to some cologne, water again, took off his boots, and opened his clothing, and sloshed himself good with the stuff. Then he listened at the door. Locke's telephone conversation showed no signs of terminating. Joe turned again to the mirror and began a rehearsal. "Listen, mister. Townie. Listen, Townie. Did I mention to you my kid is sicker and shit? Well, he is, and I gotta get him south quick as I can. Yeah, well, I don't know what all he's got wrong. Had polio when he was teensy, and now he's snotting, had the nose shivers and sweats all the time, busted leg, every damn thing. So, what I thought, Townie, I thought I better get him on down south quick. Now listen, listen to me, goddamn ya. Shh," he cautioned himself, and then continued the rehearsal in a whisper. "Now if you'll just listen to me, Townie. Oh, I've had a hell of a good time here tonight, listening to you for about 48 hours straight. Oh my, yes. I've sure enjoyed it. Every goddamn busy-ass second of it. But now, you listen a while. I want some money. I got to have it quick, too. So if you want to swing on this thing, you better shut up and start a-swinging." In the sitting room, Townsend P. Locke sat on the edge of the couch, one hand resting on the telephone receiver, which had been placed in its cradle, and the other hand covering his mouth. His eyes were big with worry. "Oh, Joe," he said, as his guest returned to the room, "I behaved so childishly. I shouted. I was nasty. I was impudent. Should I call her back and apologize? She despises extravagance. Luxury she adores. Extravagance, no. She makes these marvelous distinctions. Well, I can't worry, can I? Shall we agitation he felt. Joe fixed his face into a smile and looked at Locke. Locke looked up and met Joe's eyes and gave a small laugh. Joe nodded. Then he said, "What do you want, Tony?" Locke raised his black eyebrows and said, "What?" Joe made a loose, shallow cup of his hand and let it fall near his crouch. "What you got me up here for?" "Oh," Locke cried out, pressing his hand against his heart. His face showed genuine pain. "It's so difficult, impossible. You young people, you don't know what you do. You have this agonizing beauty. I know you're a splendid, truly lovely person, Joe. I knew it. I knew that at once. I told you so in the street. And now you make this obscene gesture. And the combination, the innocence, the obscenity, there's something so agonizing in it, so beautiful. I'm not sure I can bear it. I should never have asked you up. I wanted so to be decent this trip. I was going to try so hard not to disgust myself. I suppose I hoped that we could have some communion in conversation, that I, as an older person, might convey to some of my impressions of the world. What I mean is that I hoped we could find some higher level of exchange. Isn't that ridiculous?" He took a long swallow of gin, and when he was used to having it in him, he spoke again, his voice dark and vehement. I loathe life. I loathe every minute of it." He started to erase these words with a laugh, but gave it up at once. "Please go now. Please. Don't make it more difficult for me. Just go, while I've got this scrap of strength left. The strength to ask you to." "You mean go?" Joe said. "You want me to leave?" "Please understand. I don't want. Well, yes, I do. I want you to. Please. I want you to leave." Locke reached out and took Joe's hand, squeezing it between his own. "Please help me be good," he pleaded. "I don't want to be like I was in July." Joe nodded. His own disappointment was great, but still he understood the man's plea. He started to walk away, but Locke held onto his hand. "Joe, listen. Will you come back tomorrow and see me? Will you promise?" "What's going on tomorrow?" Joe said. "That ain't going on